Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app to your smartphone so you can stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today, and the clockwork of the spirits has its own internal time, and what an honor today to bring in a cat who, one of the nastiest white gospel drummers of all time, and it's fair to say that the clip we just heard, which was a live in studio recording of Freddie Hubbard, actually galvanized my interest in music in college. Up to that point, I was a sports broadcaster. And after seeing this video, became very enthused with the humanity of the session. And, fast forward 2 decades, 7.5 years later, and 3,500 interviews, I got a chance to interview the drummer on that session, and he's done a whole lot in his career producing and on the trap set. Bill Maxwell, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, happy to be here, Jake.
It's great to connect with you, man. I just wanted to. I always like to ask the cats this question, but can you talk about your concept related to the downbeat when you're playing improvisational music in a live setting, and everybody in the band loses where the one is? And then they sort of, through that magic of music and that telepathy, they all come back in on the one. I wanted you to talk about Bill Maxwell's concept of any note can be the one.
Well, that's an unusual concept. I've spent a lot of my life since I was in my late 20s playing with the bass player Abraham Laboriel. Yeah. And we used to always say, one is where Abraham isn't. Abraham comes from Latino heritage, and so he's if it feels like one, it's usually 4 with him, because that's where he puts it. But I remember playing with Joe Sample one time, and he said, "I think you've been playing with that." And I need my one right there.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. The Skype dropped there. Say that one more time. Joe Sample said what?
Sorry, Joe Sample said, "I think you've been playing with the Latino bass player Abraham Laboriel too much." I'm getting another call. That's why it's beeping.
It's fine. No, it's fine. Yeah. So he said. Yeah.
He said, "But you can play all the stuff in the middle of the bar you want, but you have to give me one. Because I'm from Texas and I need to have a good one to land on." So the concept is it's different with everybody. I find that for me, I try to have the music in my heart and in my mind, and so it doesn't really matter what my hands are doing or what anybody's playing. I know where it is because it's inside of me. And so I feel like if it's truly inside me, if I've learned the music and I've felt the music, I can be anywhere I want to, but the music is never changing for me. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, no, it's I'm just curious. I mean, I'm 40 years old, so I mean, my generation, I'm a Gen Xer, younger generations. When I see them play live, people are very concerned and uptight about what, you'll hear people say, "Where's the one? Where's the one? Where's the one?" And I mean, Tom Ledden, Bernie's brother, used to play with James Jamerson, and and he'd get annoyed. Jamerson would say, "Any note can be the one." And I oftentimes think about I'm dedicated to increasing music vocabulary, and I feel like that's part of it. And I just wanted you to talk about, clearly everything's different, but if you play in one, have you ever just played in a band where you're always playing in one?
No. I've been the drummer that some guys maybe that weren't used to a guy like me. I'm better now. Well, I would scare them because I didn't play one, and I could be taking rhythms kind of far out there, and if they were afraid they were getting lost. I've since learned to adapt to who I'm playing with, but I've never played in a band where everyone is playing one, and you have to play that. I understand what Jamerson meant. Jamerson meant by one, he meant anywhere in the bar could be the emphasis note. Which is where the feeling of the music is. It could be on the end of 3, it could be on 4, the end of 5 if it's a 5/4. Any note can be the emphasis note, so that could be the 1 to them. But in the way it's measured, if you're doing a 3/4, a 4/4, a 5/4, or a 7/8, there is a legitimate 1 to each one of those bars. But that doesn't mean everybody has to play them. It really depends on the melody and how the melody's going, and the emphasis note of the bar may not be 1. It could be 2.5. It could be 3. It could be 4, which is so prominent in the Latin music. That 4 is the emphasis note that feels like the 1. I just know, as I said, if the music is inside of me, it doesn't really matter. What I play, that music is still going on.
Well, setting aside people, I mean, you might claim that you've matured or become more adaptable to other people's time feels, but can you talk about early on when you were playing and stretching out, playing through rhythms? I mean, I'd love to hear about some of these early bands. I mean, the All Music Guide, I know your career in LA started in the early 70s or thereabouts, but I really would love you to talk a little bit about playing through rhythms early on in your career, regardless of whether people were uncomfortable or not. You said, I've gotten better. I don't necessarily even agree with that.
Well, I've gotten better at knowing who I'm playing.
I dig. But I want you to talk about, why were you obsessed at that time? Because it wasn't about facility with Bill Maxwell. You play from your heart. So can you just talk about stretching and playing through rhythms early on, if there was a band that you could talk about, or even just in the studio?
Well, I started as a very young musician. I started in a piano music school when I was 2 years old, and started on other instruments, and I switched to drums when I was 12, and I was in no stretching rhythms there, with rock and roll bands with 2 guitars or 3 guitars and bass and drums, up until I was 14, and I joined a band with a guy who became a very well-known Native American guitar player named Jesse Ed Davis.
Are you kidding me? You played with Jesse Ed?
Yeah, when I was 14.
In Oklahoma or in
Yeah, I'm from Oklahoma.
Right. Unbelievable. So you knew
he's from Oklahoma City.
Yeah, because he's a Comanche. He's a Comanche Indian, I think.
Yeah, he's Comanche, Kiowa.
So explain how you go break this down. So how did you met Jesse Ed in just on playing gigs in the black side of town, or where did you meet him?
No, I was like 13 or 14, almost at my 14th birthday, and I had this friend who was taking drum lessons from me. I don't know what business I had giving drum lessons at 13 or 14, but he had an audition for this band called the Continentals, which was Jesse Ed's band. Back then we just called him Eddie Davis. His father was Jesse, and so I went over with him to the audition, and he played, and then my friend mentioned that I played, and I played a little bit, and so he offered me the job to be in his band. And it was a bass player named John Selk, who later moved out here to Los Angeles, and Ed, and a singer named Carl Rogel, and Roger Edwards, and I think Ed was in his first year in college. I was at the last year of junior high school. But I know this, that when I became a freshman in high school, they had a party they called the Howdy Mixer, where everybody meets each other, and I played my own freshman party with Jesse Ed's band. And the band was really kind of a copy of Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, which later became the band. We did most of those songs like Who Do You Love and, Early in the Morning.
Oh, this is unbelievable. You were playing, hold on a second. This is, just before we go on, how was this band different than the other bands that you had been playing in prior to, or just in general, the school bands?
It was better, although I played with a really good guitar player named Rick White. The school I went to in Oklahoma City, Northwest Classen, had a lot of very good musicians that came out of it. Vince Gill lived about 3 blocks from me, and he went to the same high school. And so the guitar players in Oklahoma City were really, really good. And Benny Garcia, who was a great jazz guitar player that had played with Benny Goodman, his son is Vince Gill's tech, and he grew up with Vince, and Vince learned from Benny, and there's just a heritage of guitarists in Oklahoma, and Jesse Ed being one of them, and Hadley Hawkinsmith, another. They're just tremendous guitar players. So this was better for me. You know, I was raised by my grandparents. My parents had died, and they were liberal in letting me go out and play with the band. So I would go on weekends to Fayetteville, Arkansas, to play the Ronnie Hawkins House Club called the Rockwood, and then we would play Air Force bases and Army bases in Texas and party. So I traveled on weekends with Eddie's band.
Oh my God, this is unbelievable.
And I learned a lot. As a matter of fact, when I was 16, I was playing in another band, and Jesse Ed came by and he said, "I'm going to move to California. I want you to come with me." And I said, "Man, I really want to. I wanted to get out of there so badly and come to L.A. and play with the great musicians." But I said, "I promised my grandparents I would graduate school, and I just can't leave." But I stayed close with Ed, and when I first came to town, Ed took me over to Graham Parsons' place and introduced me to Graham, and met Delaney Bramlett and Sly Stone and a lot of people. And Jesse Ed would always tell everybody about me.
I mean, let's just break it. Did you know in Oak City a guy named Joe Davis and Fred Tackett? They were up there for a while.
Fred Tackett lived 2 blocks from me.
Oh my God, are you kidding? I just did a Facebook Live interview with Fred in Topanga Canyon last week.
Yeah. Well, I'm very close to Fred, and Fred, as a matter of fact, used to give me rides to school because I wasn't old enough to drive, and we had a band. I had a band that it started called the Jades, and Fred Tackett played guitar on some of our demo recordings. Back in the 1965 or 66 or something.
Wait a minute, hold on. This was what's in the studios in Oak City, or
yeah.
Oh my God!
There were several studios in Oklahoma City. One called Gene Sullivan Recording Studio, and which had some big country songs recorded there, and another one called Benson Sound, which is where Michael O'Marty and the great session player that did arranged all the Steely Dan or a lot of their records, the Asia song. That was the first sessions he ever did was at Benson Sound.
But I interviewed Michael like 5 years ago, and I'm deeply connected to both you, and I love Michael. I didn't know he did. I didn't know he did the arrangement. He did the arrangements on Asia.
Yeah.
Well, that's my second daughter's name. That's unbelievable. God.
The horn parts were done by Tom Scott, but Michael did those. I became friends with Michael later, and when he found out I was from Oklahoma, I started hiring Michael in the 70s when I started producing. He told me this first session he had ever done was at Benson Sound when he was traveling with somebody. So there were studios in Oklahoma City, and Fred was my dear friend. He was actually playing drums in Joe Davis' band.
Oh, my God, this is so good.
And he would play trumpet every now and then, and some show, there was a club called the Copa Habana or the Habana Inn, and they would bring in traveling artists and bands, and one of the bands came through and really liked Fred and asked if he wanted to go to Hawaii with them playing guitar. And so Fred went to Hawaii, and that's where he met Jimmy Webb.
No, I'm looking at the story. He said they'd have these little feature shows. We'd back up floor show, grade C talent acts like Don Cherry, 2 Jacks and a Jill, musicians and belly dancers. It was like Ricky Ricardo going down to the clubs, and basically a Filipino act came in, Moses and the Highbrows, and then he went on tour with them, and then he wound up in Hawaii. And the funny thing is, he was approached when he was there. He was playing Ode for Billy Joe, and then these 2 guys approached him and said, "Hey, can you come back to the hotel after the gig?" And he looked at his buddies like, "Hey, man, we're going to score some great LSD." And it turned out they were introducing him to Jimmy Webb, and then he went to L.A. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Yep, that's the story. As a matter of my first time ever in Los Angeles, I was playing a club in Las Vegas, and I had a couple of days off, and Fred invited me to come to his house and stay. And when I got there, his baby Miles was born at the house the night before I came. So I stayed with Fred and Patricia, and he took me to a Jimmy Webb session for Thelma Houston They were doing the Sun Shower album.
Oh my God,
my
I can't. This is crazy, man. So Max, hold on. So you is it? So I just want to be clear. You cut some demos in Oklahoma. Did you actually cut any records before you moved to LA?
Yeah, there's some of them floating around, but it's nothing that anybody could hear.
Well, and what
now? I mean, there's some singles.
Some singles. So I mean, and it's essentially it was like. I guess I would, because Tackett was obsessed with when he was playing drums. He was a big jazzer, and I wanted you to talk about, because what I love so much about your generation and even prior to that was that all the drummers had their own individual sound, and if someone came up and said, "Oh man, you sounded great, you sounded just like so and so," they want to slit their wrists. And I just wanted to know about early on. Ultimately,
I kind of went past your question. I can get to that. No.
Oh, don't worry. No, this is total stream of consciousness. I'm just saying that I'm curious if you could talk to, especially people listening around the world, about how you. One thing I also have an issue with today is I hear very little dynamics in modern pop music, and also on the bandstand sometimes, again, younger cats, the decibel, they turn it up to 10 and it stays there the entire show. And those jazz drummers and even the great session cats were all jazz freaks, Gary Chester, Keltner, all those guys. So they were always playing they were using the bass drum for rebound, and they were really keeping time on the top of the kit. And I wanted you to just talk a little bit about how you use the top of the kit and the bottom of the kit. And if you learned how to play, a jazz top with a rock bottom, how that evolved for Bill Maxwell.
Well, it was not a conscious thought. I always had music that I liked, and I would try to emulate the way that music felt within my playing, and different music at different times moved me. But when I was young and I heard What I Say, the drum beat for Ray Charles drummer, and I Got a Woman, which was 2-beat gospel, and all that music got me, and James Brown music, and I wanted to play those beats, and I wanted to feel like those records. But I know that my drumming radically improved because I started out playing a snare drum in a summer band. When I got a bass drum, everything made sense because I'm kind of foot heavy.
Dude, ride like the wind, right? Did you get a chance? I mean, when you played Ronnie, I've interviewed Ronnie Hawkins. Did you get a chance? Did you cross paths with Levon at that time? Was he playing guitar?
No, Levon played drums.
Well, no, but he would play. But in the Hawks, he played guitar in the Hawks.
No, Levon played drums in the Hawks. Robbie Robertson played guitar.
Right. Just to be clear, though, he did start out as a guitar player. Levon did.
I didn't know him as that. I knew him when he played mandolin and when he came out with the band later. As a matter of fact, it's funny because I was just listening. I was playing at a club called the Onyx Club in Oklahoma City in 1965, and they let us go for 2 nights to bring in Levon and the Hawks. They had just left Ronnie Hawkins, and it was called Levon and the Hawks, and the saxophone player in my band asked if he could record them. He had an old Roberts 2-track recorder, and he recorded them, and I have a copy of it in my car on a hard drive.
Oh my God! Wait, you have it on analog cassette or CD?
It was sent to me, but Bob died, the guy who recorded it, and a fellow in Oklahoma, Joe Bob Nelson, had the tapes, and he made me a CD and sent me the CD, and I transferred it to a hard drive in my car, and I've lost the original CD. So now it's only I can't get rid of my car because it's in my hard drive.
so I because whether it was I've talked to Tulsa was a hotbed of Jimmy Karstein and Chuck Blackwell and all the lineage is so deep, and then you get to Oak City and there were cats like Bill Maxwell and Cleve Warren and all these guys and did you have a chance to play like organ drum gigs where it was just like a B3 player and you?
Well, the band that I started when I was 15, after Ed was going to move to California, close to 16. It was called the Jades, and the organ player that we had in the band, his name was Harlan Rogers, and he played organ bass. And so we had a really good B3 band. We would play jazz clubs, and I have some tapes of him where it's like Jimmy Smith at his best.
Dude, he was kicking pedals. He was kicking pedals on the
pedals, and he had the left hand wired down an octave with the pedals going through the bass amp, and two Leslies, and so I used to play jazz clubs, and what kind of turned me around, if you were talking about the rhythm and the spacing, is when I was 15, a friend of mine taught my grandparents and let me fly to Austin, Texas with him at the Austin Jazz Festival, and I saw Tony Williams with Miles Davis, and that kind of turned me around to being very free. Tony was wild. I didn't really realize at the time. I just knew it was something I'd never heard. He would turn the beat around. It didn't matter. They would join him. He was free to do whatever, and they just kind of had signals to get back to whatever their phrase to get them back to the song. But I was a little too influenced by Tony Williams for a while.
Well, hold on for a second. Let's be clear. I'm so fascinated with nonverbal communication because when I talked to Tommy Coster, the great pianist with Santana and whatnot, he talked about essentially the same time period, hearing that Miles band with Tony and Ron, and it was really the first time they were taking standard tunes and then leaving the head of the tune and then playing free and then coming back into the tune after maybe 15 minutes. I mean, can you talk about the signals they would use? And that's kind of what I meant with any note can be the one, the idea of...
Yeah, well, they had signals. I talked to Herbie Hancock about it one time, and he said, yeah, they play through the things, and then Miles and Wayne had these unison lines, and they would kind of look at each other, and they'd just play these, and these unison lines floating over, and that got them back into where they weren't going to go. And so that was their setup, so they all knew. I didn't realize that's what it was. I would just be in the midst of all this freedom. I would hear these floaty lines, and then bang, they're onto something. But they were free, and so we did a lot of. Of course, that was my early days, and all the musicians were smoking weed. And I think Fred Tackett's the first one that gave me weed. And
I just smoked. I mean, he hasn't stopped because we just smoked 2 joints at his house last week. So everybody was getting high.
He took me out, and we would getting acquainted. It was kind of at the period of Joe Zavino coming in, and we would try to emulate that kind of music. And then I'd go back at night and play with my band, which played Sam and Dave songs, and then maybe do R&B. But then I would go out and jam as much as I could, playing jazz. So I was kind of trapped between different worlds, R&B and pop music and jazz. And in Oklahoma, we had to play everything. And so, as you mentioned, Jim Keltner, I met Jim when I met Delaney and Bonnie in maybe 1968. And Jim is one of the people who's helped me throughout my life. He got me my first drum endorsement, and he gets me interviews in magazines, and he's always been so helpful and such a dear friend. He's one of the greatest people I know. So I met some really wonderful musicians and people like Fred and Jesse Ed in Oklahoma.
But you didn't meet Keltner till you got to the West Coast.
No, I met him in Tulsa.
Okay, I've done 4 interviews with Keltner, and I couldn't agree more. I've never met him in person, but I mean, I love the man dearly. And can you talk about?
I talked to him last week. Yeah, Jim is just the greatest.
Well, no. Tell me about when you.
He was playing with Delaney and Bonnie and Johnny Cale, J.J. Cale. They came to do some show, and he used to come out and hear my band every night. And so Jim took my phone number, and he would tell everybody about me. We love playing double drums together.
Oh, okay, Maxwell. You're blowing my mind right now. Wait, hold on. He was playing with J.J. Cale in Oak City. He'd come see.
No, in Tulsa. I was playing a club in Tulsa.
You were playing a club in Tulsa, and what was the name of your band?
Third Avenue Blues Band.
Okay, so where did that fit in with the band after Jesse Ed left? Because that was a different...
Well, I left Jesse Ed, I left that band. I started a band called the Jades with Harlan Rogers and eventually Hadley Hawkinsmith, and we became the Third Avenue Blues Band because we recorded some of our songs, and T-Bone Burnett had produced it down in Fort Worth. That was just out of high school, and the record company changed our name. And so it was either the Jades or the Third Avenue Blues. Same band. That's when I met Jim. Jim was playing with Delaney and Bonnie. Carl was playing bass. Johnny Cahill had moved back to Tulsa, and he played guitar at the live concert. I think Carl Radel was playing bass. Yeah, Carl was there. And so I met Delaney and Bonnie and all those guys back then.
They and what's interesting is that so this is fascinating. Kellner was still in Tulsa.
No, he was in L.A., but he went to Tulsa a lot. He was on tour with Delaney and Bonnie.
So what I'm saying is when you met him, he was with Delaney and Bonnie, but he had already relocated. He was already in California at that point.
He went. I think he came out like right about the end of his high school to California.
When did you first play double drums with him?
I did something for Steve Ripley, some songs with that, and then we did an album for Cassandra Wilson,
wow,
a jazz singer, and we did double drums on a lot of that. And then we did T-Bone Burnett's album. We did double drums. I've done some other. I can't remember. I know I've done more with Jim. But I love playing with him.
How do you? How did you become? I mean, I wound up. I live in Tucson. I wound up going into this thrift store, and somebody had literally dumped the hippest gospel records I've ever seen in my life. I mean, obviously, the Omardian records and just all this like obscure, like crazy stuff on Light, like black gospel bands with Joe Osborne and on bass and this stuff. And then I find this album. This Andre Crouch album, it's called "Take Me Back," and I'm like, Max, because I knew you from that Freddie session, which was burning, and then I'm like, this cat was playing. Like, how did you become the white gospel guy? And did it, in fact, have to do with this? You said you were caught in between the R&B, the Sam and Dave, and the Tony Williams. Did that help you become the gospel drummer?
I didn't try to become a gospel drummer. I had a radical conversion. I was I was at the end of my rope, and I became a Christian. And when I did, 3 of the guys in the band became Christians with me, and we stopped playing clubs, and I started playing in a little. And he said, it sounds like I'm bragging, but he said I'd never heard, people playing gospel music this good. They were this good a musicians. So he started trying to hire us, and eventually, in the summer of 1972, I moved to Los Angeles with him. My first time playing with him was on The Tonight Show in July of 1972, and then he asked me to play on his records, and he wanted to produce his records himself, and he asked me to help him. So I called Fred Tackett, got Fred to come play guitar, Dean Parks, who I'd known in Texas, and I hired the band's Joe Sample to play piano. And pretty soon Andre said, well, you're producing this more than me, and he made me a co-producer.
My God. I want to be clear about something. This is very important because one of the L's on my show is life, and it's talking about refers to overcoming adversity. I mean, can you talk about when you were at the end of your rope? How did you overcome that? I mean, I guess you would say that you found God. I mean, this is very important.
Yeah, I had some people talk to me. I was doing drugs. I hadn't gotten into it. I was being offered heroin. I hadn't gotten into it, but it was getting close. I was taking LSD, and I'd snorted coke. I was high on weed all the time, and I was very unhappy. I was in a bad marriage. My wife was sick. I had a brand new baby. I was a 19-year-old father. Things were just falling apart. I got offered a bass player named Gene Perla, told Randy Brecker about me.
Are you? I've interviewed all these. I'm going to send you all these interviews. Are you kidding me? How the heck did you know Gene Perla?
He was playing with Woody Herman, and we traded sets in Fort Worth.
Well, wait. Wait. So he was playing bass, though. I mean, who was playing drums with Woody at that time?
I don't remember.
I cannot. Wait. So hold on. Hold on. So you traded set. So I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. And Randy. This is my blowing my mind.
Well, Gene and he took my phone numbers. Said, man, you play great. I mean, and we traded phone numbers, and I was unhappy with the band that I was in. The Third Avenue Blues Band was deteriorating, and I got a call from Randy. Said, Gene Perla gave me your phone number. Would you come out? We have a band called Dreams. Billy Cobham has just left the band, and would you come out and audition?
Oh my God!
And they flew me to New York, and I, of course, immediately when I got there, I started doing more drugs again, and the band was great. Will Lee was on bass, and I think Barry
Rogers on Bone. The sickest band ever.
Yeah, Barry Rogers. Yeah, and of course Randy and Michael, and I became good friends with Michael. And so they told me I had a job, but they didn't have any gigs. The Dreams never really went anywhere. And I was afraid to move to New York, and with no work, with a new baby. I went back to Oklahoma, and then a band called Barefoot Jerry offered me a job in Nashville.
Oh my God!
And so Wayne Moss and Matt Gaden, and I went there, and I think I played terrible. They weren't happy. I wasn't happy. And I left that and went back to Oklahoma, and that's when I started going to this little church that Hadley Hawkinsmith was going, and this drummer was the speaker, and we just helped people that were in trouble. And that's how I met Andre, and that's what turned me around, where I stopped doing any kind of drugs, and everything went a lot better. My life was radically changed. But then when I moved to L.A., I immediately called Fred. I called Dean Parks, and when I started working with Andre, Andre said, well, you get the musicians for me. So I called the guys that I knew and I liked, David Hungate. I called in to play bass, and as I said, Joe Sample.
Dude, don't even forget about one of the most spiritual cats of all time is Wilton Felder.
Yeah, Wilton played bass on those too.
Sickest.
So
yeah, go ahead.
And so, after that was the first album I had produced, and it won Andre's first Grammy. And so I immediately started getting hired to produce records.
Well, for the audience out there, we're talking to the most humble cat, obviously a divine intervention, because Andre was brought to you by the Lord. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's no doubt about it, and it's so beautiful to talk about, so critical to talk about in this time of opioid addiction and all sorts of. The music industry has changed so much. This brotherhood that existed. I think that I've talked to Michael Shreve many times. I've talked to 3,500 interviews, and they were all seeing their friends become roadkill. And Bill Maxwell was on that path, and the divine pushed you, got you into a much more sanctified, beautiful setting, and we're all happy for it. Let's take a listen to this Grammy Award-winning album that Maxwell produced. Take a listen to it. We'll come back and break it down. All right?
Okay.
1975.
24 years ago.
Wait, 25 and how many? 30 what?
I said that was 44 years ago.
44 years ago. Can I ask you what you? I mean, you might not. You might gloss over it, but you listen to my God, Willie Banks and the Messengers and these sanctified churches where really when you listen to that bass, that's where Chuck Rainey was playing that bass from, and it was just so funky. And what did you do arrangement-wise that made that a Grammy Award-winning record?
Oh, I don't know. I really can't tell you. I felt that Andre's records before that were, for such a diverse musical, incredible genius he was, his records were pretty whitewashed. They didn't have as much funk to it as I thought it should. And I really wasn't basing anything off of gospel music because I didn't really grow up listening to black gospel music. I just took what I learned as a musician, being from Oklahoma, the kind of music I like to play, and combined that with Andre's gospel roots. And that, I saw an interview with a great drummer that just died, Joe Smith, from Edwin Hawkins Singers, and he said, well, the only gospel drummer that was ever known was Bill Maxwell. I copied him. I wasn't copying gospel, so I don't know. I just was myself. I tried to, play the music as good as I could and play whatever fit the songs at the best of my ability at that time.
What do you mean? What do you mean whitewashed? His prior albums.
I just felt like they sounded a little more like a variety show on television, up with people, or it was like the Fifth Dimension or something.
I dig.
It wasn't as funky as it.
It was too square.
Yeah, that's one word. There's some great songs on there, but in general, the albums they just needed some more heart to them, to me.
Did you? I mean, they definitely needed. I mean, that album is easily his best album. I mean, why did you not? Okay, so you threw some more funk in there. I mean, how did that play out? Did you just sort of work with Wilton or Hungate on?
No, Andre would write songs, and then we would have arrangers too. We had a very good arranger named Larry Mahobarak, and Fletch Wiley, who was playing in Andre's band, that had been in the band with me, the Third Avenue Blues Band, would write chord charts and write arrangements, and we'd take it and try to add to that. And then sometimes we'd just go in. Andre had a blues kind of song that's on this album called They Shall Be Mine, and I just had Joe Sample and I can't remember who. I think Wilton on bass.
Definitely Wilton and Larry Carlton.
And me. And it was just like a blues guitar player from Texas named Michael Neal, and me, and it was a blues, and we just played that straight out, featuring Joe's kind of. So there was a lot of diversity on the album. There may be something like what you just heard that kind of sounds like the Delphonics or one of the Philadelphia groups, and then there's something that's gospel, like Take Me Back, and then there'll be more funk, like Oh Savior. There was just we used a lot of variety. He probably wouldn't let you do an album like that now because it was all over the place in the styles, but it worked because the message was the same, but the music varied.
Now, let's be clear. Why wouldn't it go to? How has gospel music changed? To me, I hear.
All music has changed. It's all formatted.
Well, I mean, but also like when I go up to people here in Tucson, cats that are going to Baptist churches, and they'll say, we don't have a band, we just have a choir. It's become very vocalized, and it's also, to me, the music is much more predicated around worship music as opposed to good heart-feeling music. I just want you to riff on. Can you talk? Because I asked Omardian about this in our interview, and he was so eloquent. How has gospel music changed from the time that you first really started to, for better, whether you like the title or not, became known as a really amazing gospel feel drummer?
It's really, first thing is it's much more segregated than it was. In our band with Andre, it was a band like Sly and the Family Stone, black people, white people, all styles put together, blending. Now it's formatted. You go to gospel radio, you have the Kirk Franklin channel. It's all black gospel artists. A lot of it, music sounds the same to me. Singers sound the same. They're saying the same thing. And then you go to the white gospel format, and most of their worship music sounds like U2 to me.
Right.
It sounds like you're staying on one chord and you're chanting, and with a kind of a moving 16th note drum beat. And most of the songs are talking about themselves. Oh, I don't feel this, and people don't understand me, and I feel so alone. Whereas the music we were talking about was talking about the Lord, talking about Him, how much He loves us, not about ourselves and all our predicaments. And that's so message-wise, it seems a little more selfish. And musically, it definitely seems squashed.
I love
not
this.
nearly
This is
as
so
bright.
spot on, dude. This is unbelievably. So it's more self-centered. The songs, I think you nailed it. It's always I
Yep.
about your there. You know what you're misunderstood. I'm misunderstood. I don't. Before, I mean, you listen to White Horse or Adam Again, Omardian out. Those are ridiculous albums, and he's basically writing stuff that came out of scripture.
Yeah, of course, that's what we did, and that we always based things on that. That's when I met Omardian. Omardian came in and started playing on. I produced an artist named Danny Bell Hall, and Michael played on those albums with Wilton. I met Michael actually through Wilton, and I loved him and loved playing with him. And I started a band, or Abraham Laboriel and I started a band called Koinonia later that Michael was initially going to be in, but he was so famous as a producer and was kind of high from projects that when we played live, too many people were chasing him down, so he bailed.
Dude, he was so dude, I have him arranging on like Temptations albums. It's
Yeah,
insane.
he was working all the time. He was producing so many. He was the head of A&R for Warner Brothers.
Are you kidding me? I don't think I even knew that. I mean, wait, hold on. So wait, this guy, who was the Michael Bell? Who was the guy that Wilton introduced you to? Or I mean, I'm sorry, who was the?
Omardian. He introduced me to Omardian.
Right, but who was
I,
who was the guy you were doing records for? This he had three names, three different names. You just said it.
I said Danny Bell Hall.
Danny Bell. When was that?
So, Danny Bell Hall is a great singer named Hall, and she had a contract with Light Records, and I produced 3 or 4 albums for her on Light, and I produced 2 records for her on Sparrow.
This is so.
Michael played on.
Yeah, no, I'm
Michael
looking at this.
played on those.
75 Danabelle Hall sounds about right. This moment.
That's the second Danny Bell album.
We need to get your
Michael's
discography updated online. This is a travesty. It says you started with, you know, I mean, I know you started way back in the 60s, but I mean, like, this is like, can you just talk a little bit about, you know, like, I've interviewed Sklar.
Yeah,
And,
I haven't really done my online bio. Every time I started with Wikipedia, it just felt like an ego trip, and I just backed off.
I don't think it's an ego trip when you have ethnomusicologists and reliquaries like Jake Feinberg who are, you know, this is extremely important for, you're just getting hip to my show, but I mean, I'm promoting how real music is made. So you're humbled. You've been humbled enough. So, I mean, anyway, just to me, it's like, you know, you stumble into some of this stuff. But can you just talk about the community? You said you used this really fascinating word about, you know, how contemporary gospel music has changed. You said it's a lot more segregated. And like, I know that Keltner, he, the night RFK was murdered, this is before you moved to LA. He was playing in an R&B band with the guy who wrote the music to The Wiz, Charlie Watts, or some name like that. And Wilton Felder was playing bass, and Wilton had his Bible with him, and there was all this commotion, and they went, you know, Jim's like, what's going on? The set hadn't started yet. Robert Kennedy was supposed to come to the show after the convention, and Wilton said, I don't know, there's some kind of commotion in the TV room. Or in the green room, they went back there, and Sirhan Sirhan had murdered RFK. Yeah. And I've always been fascinated by this, because it was such, the time that you moved out there was such a druggy time. And did you feel like that you had this sort of, between Larry Mubarak, Omardian, Wilton, did you guys find, you said the music's become more segregated, but were you working in the studio a lot with people that were strung out?
No. Wilton wasn't doing any drugs. Obviously, Joe, not any. And when we played, you know, the sessions, because my sessions were hard, because we didn't have the money that a lot of other musicians had, where we could spend all day on one song. We would have to cut 2 to 3 songs in 3 hours. So we had to have it pretty organized. So if you weren't on the top of your game, you weren't able to come in and read all this and come to good conclusions quickly. You know, so we were lower budget albums. So I really had to have people like Wilton was a fantastic reader because he played saxophone. He read instantly on bass. That's why that bass line on "I Want You Back" for the Jackson 5, that was all written out for him by Gene Page. Very few bass players could sight read that, but Wilton could.
Oh my God, that is bad. Wait, so did you wind up? I'm just letting you know, the first album it's crediting you on is 1975, "Take Me Back." This is ridiculous. So you moved in '72, and
Yeah, I played on Andre's album called Just Andre. We did that in '72. Played on live in Carnegie Hall. But the sad thing about that, I'm not very happy with my performance because it was recorded in March of 1972 live at Carnegie Hall with another drummer, and Andre hated it. And I replaced all the drums. His piano was recorded with a help and still pickup, which didn't have that much leakage. So I replaced all the drums, and I had to follow wherever the band had gone. So probably my first credited album was live at Carnegie Hall with Andre, but that was done in '72. Just Andre was also done in '72. To see these albums come out a year or so later after you do them, after you start them.
I just want to be clear. You're telling me you actually didn't play the live gig. You just overdubbed the drum parts of that drum.
Yeah, for the whole album. We replaced everything except the singers.
Outside of Andre, once you started to, what other early '70s sessions were you doing a lot of work with Light? I'm so fixated on this time of early '70s authentic gospel music. I mean, I was on the road probably 250 days a year. Okay, so you were Andre wanted you. You were on the road as well.
I was on the road, and I'd come home and produce records and play sessions, and so I was booked all the time. I didn't have any time, so they were kind of all in a row. A lot of these records, Danny Bell and Andre were going on at the same time as Keith Green, who I produced for Sparrow Records, who was a friend of Bob Dylan's, and that's how I met Bob. Bob came and played harmonica for us on that album. Keith was a really good, white Christian artist, more of a rock and roll type.
You're talking about Keith Green.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know that. Do you think because again, going back to Tackett, Keltner, Tim Drummond, they went on this incredible gospel tour when Dylan got.
I was around. I was around Bob, and I went to the concert in Santa Monica with T-Bone Burnett and Christopherson when they played here. So I was around Jim a lot then.
No, let me ask you though, because Bob, I mean, he was doing Hard Rain, and all of a sudden the Keith Green stuff comes in mid-'70s. Did you guys talk to? I mean, he became Christian. I mean, did you guys play a role in that?
I did. When I met him, Bob was already a Christian. Keith wanted me to meet Bob, and we went over to Buck Herring's house, and Bob was working on the album Saved, and he had some rough mixes and played us, which were really good. I think better than the mixes. That album sounded really good.
Yeah.
And we hung out with Bob a little bit, and I asked Bob if he wanted to come play harmonica. He said sure, because he told me his favorite album that year was the first album I produced for Keith Green, for him who has ears to hear. So Bob was a big fan of Keith, and I've known Keltner. I'm thinking if there's anybody else in the. Well, Fred was in the band.
Well, no, Tackett was in the band, Drummond, but those guys were just the thing that was. I vetted this very hard. I just want to be clear. Mike Dacey was on this gig with Keith Green. Dean Parks.
No, yeah.
Harlan Rogers again. Is he still with us,
yeah.
Harlan?
Yeah, he doesn't play music anymore. He lives in Texas. Spends a lot of time fishing.
Well, if you have any way of getting a hold of him, I would love it. This cat. Anyone did you know Rudolph Johnson and Chester Thompson when they were there in Oklahoma City?
I'm sounding over. Yeah, I knew Chester. He used to play at the Treva's Lounge with a drummer named George Moreland, who was a great drummer.
Dude, I
was playing in Indianapolis, and I ran into the Rudy Johnson trio with Chester in Indianapolis, and I remember We went out and got White Castle burgers one night.
No, because listen, man, wait, was Herschel Davis on drums? There was a sick drummer in that Rudolph John. I just want to be very clear. You listen to there's an album Chester put out called Powerhouse in the early '70s, and Rudolph's playing is exactly what you said earlier about Oklahoma City. You had to play everything. You had to play R&B. You had to play jazz. You had to play pop. All the solos are burning, and they mix all the musics together. Those guys were yogis. Rudolph was a yogi at that time. They were out of control, that band.
Yeah, no, they were really good.
Oh my dude, Maxwell! I can't believe how. No, because that's what Keltner told me. I'll send you all these interviews, but it's like Keltner was like, Bob really tried. It was very bizarre because people would hold up signs like, hey Bob, Jesus loves your old songs too, and he never got really accepted by the contemporary pop Christian. It wasn't like pop Christian artists were coming to see him. And the band itself was doing everything short of smack, pretty much. Bob wasn't smoking cigarettes in front of people. It was just interesting. I look at how I am a deep spiritual person. I'm a Taoist. I respect all religions, but I do feel like an exclusionary sort of thing going on as it relates to some denominations of Christianity, do you do you feel that there's more exclusion today? Do you feel like there's more segregation even amongst different denominations? Has it changed?
Yeah, it's like the whole world is hating. Everybody hates another group, and if you're not a part of this group, you're not this. But Jesus was very specific. Said, "You'll know me by the love you have one for another." And we're to be kind, we're to be forgiving, and we're to show love, and we're to act in a way that is humble. We're to prefer other people over ourselves. We're to look out for other people's best interests. We're supposed to be honest. We're supposed to be caring and kind. And I saw something on Facebook where they had John McCain's picture in flames, like "Welcome to Hell," and whoever this guy was, I got him off my list because
what's up with? Why? Okay, you can disagree. How did we go from?
I don't know. I don't have the answers to what has divided us, but I know that the Bible is very specific in the New Agreement, in the New Testament, about how we're supposed to live our lives. And the first thing is, it says, "Judge not, that you be not judged." I'm not gonna jump in judgment over anybody but myself. I'm responsible for myself, not anybody else. And my job is to really be kind and to be honest and to try to be a help to people that are in need, wherever I run into them, and to be kind to people. And I don't want to be a star. I don't want everything coming to me and get mine. I'm much happier doing something else. But I don't know how this has started. But it has become very isolated and political. Somehow political correctness has entered into this, and there's more hatred. I have musicians now that great friends of mine that I could never put on the same session because they would walk out or get in a fight. It's over political things, which is unheard of. Never been around this ever in my life.
I also wonder why people that have these, deep, sort of I don't know what the right word is, but they very strict adherence to the Bible, and they are huge supporters of people who are, without mentioning names, just inflaming things all the time with just sort of insults.
Yeah, well, it's to do. There's a reason for it. I understand it. I don't like it. But the reason for it is this one particular person you're speaking of is the president.
Yep.
Promises to not cut back on religious rights. There's a lot of fear being promoted that the Bible's going to be banned. That if you preach one thing in church, they're going to close your church. And he's guaranteeing religious freedom. So a lot of leaders are going with him as an alternative to what other people are feeling that they don't want to be a part of. They don't want to necessarily have transsexuals teaching their kids in reading programs. So there's a division that's being done about by that. But for me, this Donald Trump, the way he acts, is not anyone. I don't have any friends like that. I don't really. Those kind of people are not in my life. Sorry if I'm, turning people off by saying that.
No, I mean it's very vexing that a guy who is, I mean, I also ask you about when you were first introduced. It's interesting when you were first brought. By the way, is that guitar player who introduced you to that small church still around?
Hadley Hawkinsmith?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I need to get to that cat immediately. The point is this:
if you go to YouTube, you look up Hadley Hawkinsmith, walk on by, you can see me and him in the studio live.
Oh my God!
And playing great guitar.
Well, no, this is my question though. I mean, I oftentimes look at it and I say, so many of these people that have been, that are in fear, they no longer know how to think. They know what to think. Was your view of the war? To me, Omardian, Maxwell, Wilton. I mean, again, Lowell George and Wilton got into an argument about fornication at one time. I would have loved to have actually listened to that, but I mean, it almost, what you talked about before was like, I got to worry about you. Like, I got to concern myself with myself. How am I treating others? What am I doing? Okay. How am I? And yet sometimes you walk into a situation, it happens less and less because I'm much more secure in my path and my spirituality, and I don't get hung up on this stuff. But you feel like there are so many people who feel, okay, I am saved. I am a good Christian. And if you're not, then you're less than. Then you are. Then they're no longer looking at themselves; they're just judging others.
Yeah, well, that's just so opposite of what the Bible actually says, which is that God loves everyone equally. He loves everyone that was made, and he cares deeply, and so if you're not walking in love, you're really not following what it's talked about. And if you have to, and yeah, I have to judge myself. I'm really, if I do, I don't mean to. I'm not judging anybody except myself.
Oh no, you're you're exactly the way I thought you would be.
I'm not gonna go there, and I don't mean to, and I don't want to get in the middle of these political.
No, but it's like
I don't think it does any good.
No, but I mean, I just feel like. I don't understand. I mean, I feel like this person, this individual, again, his vice president is a very, deeply Christian person in Mike Pence. But I just wonder about this sort of inability to widen their view and to.
I don't really know.
And it's just it's a little bit scary. You talk about chanting music in Christianity now. It's very fascinating. You use the word chanting. But before we wrap up set one here, it's only set one with Bill Maxwell because we're having a ball. But can you talk a little bit about this? How you connected? How many jazz gigs did you play in L.A. and how did you wind up with connecting with Freddie?
Well, I met Fred in Oklahoma.
No, Freddie Hubbard.
I was playing at a club called the Baked Potato, and we had a band that we started with Alex Acuna on percussion, and me on drums. We would trade off. Actually, he's a great drummer and a great percussionist.
Yeah, I know who he is. He's a badass.
I'm a mediocre percussionist, but we would trade off. And we had Dean Parks and Hadley Hawkinsmith on guitar, Abraham Laboriel on bass, and Harlan Rogers on keyboards, and Justo Almario on saxophone. And it was very popular. On Monday nights, we would do 2 shows, and they would line up around the block. And Freddie used to come see us all the time. and Freddie told me. I didn't even know who he was. Of course, I knew who Freddie Hubbard was.
Right.
I didn't know that the guy that I knew was Freddie Hubbard. And he said, "Man, I want you to play on my record." I said, "Sure." And then someone told me, "That's Freddie Hubbard." I said, "Really?" Because I love Freddie Hubbard. The Maiden Voyage album of Herbie Hancock. I love that. And then when I heard him with Art Blakey and the Jazz.
Oh, Red Clay too, unbelievable.
Yeah, and so I love Freddie Hubbard. And then Alan Ferguson, who's the arranger that did that album, and really in one of the producers who had the concept. I had been doing work for Alan on some movies and TV, and he called me to play on it. He called me and Abraham to do it. That's
you were playing at the Baked Potato in that band.
Started in 1980. The name of the band was called Koinonia.
Yeah, I was trying to. I saw that before, and I'm like, that I can't even pronounce the name of that band. But
like a Koinonia.
Koinonia. You know the.
It's a Greek word that means sharing equally.
It's so cool because I just was in Burbank with Abe and Mateo doing a Facebook Live interview, and we're talking about Justo and
Mario.
Yep, and he was talking about.
Abe and Mateo just came by my house about a half hour before the interview.
No.
Yeah,
this is the totally divine situation.
I loaned Mateo my car while I was out of town.
They said, I mean, Mongo used when he was touring with Mongo before Mancini and Johnny Mathis. Sometimes Mongo would not be inspired, and Abe would start to play these, things to sort of try to on the bass to try to ignite Mongo, and sometimes it would work, but inevitably he would go back to Justo and Mongo would and say, "Please tell Abraham to just play what's on the chart." And the last time that they before Abe went to go back to Mancini and Mathis, the last conversation he had with Mongo was that Mongo said, "Listen, the reason that I was disappointed sometimes was that in Cuba, Abraham, you are a drum. And your bass is a drum. There is no bass in Cuba, and the minute that you start to play all these different lines and get all colorful, I don't know what to do with the congas." And here you are talking, over a decade later, playing with Justo and Abe in this band at the Baked Potato. It's just quite remarkable, man. I mean, the whole thing is kind of that's a beautiful spiritual path, man. I mean, what these days do you still try to get all the cats in the studio, or is it more like, oh, let me call this, he'll play this part, and then that's it for the day, and he'll leave? I mean, I think that part of the issue that we're talking about here is community and also trusting in humanity, and that, I mean, let's face it, I don't care what studios you were going to, you were in and out of those buildings. Sometimes, I know you didn't have big budgets, but the gigs you did play with big budgets, you were in before the sun came up. You left after it went down. You were around people all the time. And today people don't even know their neighbors.
Yeah, it's another thing. I keep one channel on my car on Sirius Radio to listen to the Hot 100, and I listen to it, and I can guarantee you that when I listen, not one song, there's not one that's done that's not a machine running the song, and there's maybe only 5% that are not auto-tuned vocals. So it's a machine art now, and they overdub things, and they correct things. They time correct. It's an easy trap to fall into. If I play something on the drums and I don't like this bar, well, I can cut and paste another bar in that place and time correct it and move on. And that's the way all records are made now.
And the other thing is this: you could also be a singer and not have any talent at all, but if you have enough Twitter followers, then all of a sudden you sing and they say, "How did I sound?" And the engineer says, "Terrible. Come up, we can fix it," which leads to lack of authenticity. If you're making somebody out who's couldn't even perform live if their life depended on it.
Yeah, I was in a movie called 20 Feet from Stardom about a vocalist, and
wow.
I talked about it in there that they'd say, "Oh, it's okay, we'll fix it." Melodyne and auto-tune. So it's just as common as anything. I try not to use it. I've had instances where where I'm mixing a record and the guy's a little bit out of tune and he's in Europe and I can't let it go out like that. And I'll maybe make an adjustment, but I try not to use that stuff. So if you go on to YouTube, I think there's a thing called Maxwell's All Stars. You look that up.
Yeah.
I did a series of different recordings, and they're very raw. I brought everyone in the studio, and we all played and sang live, and we didn't correct anything. And there's probably 10 or 11 songs up there. One of them that I wrote with Abraham and Mateo, called "The Bass Walk," has now got almost 3 million views, and we didn't correct anything, and we did it on the first take.
I just want to read you one. I want to read you one passage here from a radio interview I did with the great Stax drummer Willie Hall, and then have you riff on it in your own experience. He said he was wrong about the name of the tune, and I can't remember the name of the tune right now. He said, Isaac Hayes was cutting an album in Atlanta, and the whole band was there. Usually when he recorded, it would be 2 weeks at a time. We were there that weekend, and the Bee Gees were playing at the Atlanta Coliseum. Isaac took us to the concert. I think the Sweet Inspirations were doing the background. After the gig, we went backstage. Isaac had evidently known them for a while. The Bee Gees left all their groupies and went in the corner with Isaac, and they were talking about sound, so I went over and introduced myself. They were asking Isaac about a tune called Wrap It Up. It's not Wrap It Up. I don't know, forget the name of the tune. There's a clavinet part on that song, and one of the guys said, Isaac, how did you get that distorted sound on Wrap It Up? We got a 64-track board. We got everything you can name, but we cannot get that sound. We wanted to use that sound on a song that we were doing. Please, how did you do it? Isaac said, hey, man, you wouldn't believe it. That distortion came about as a mistake. They were playing the clavinet part. They had been there all day. They were tired and ready to go home. This was like the 25th take of the song. As they were overdubbing the clavinet part, the microphone fell against the amp, which naturally distorted the sound. Isaac said everyone was so tired after that, he just decided to leave it the way it was. In essence, the sound the Bee Gees were spending millions trying to make was a natural mistake that came honestly at Stax Records because the equipment was flaky. Can you talk about something that came about as a mistake in a session that you either produced or played on that turned into something beautiful that could not be replicated by technology?
Oh, that's good. That stuff happened all the time, like crickets in the middle of the session. You know, I end up, how do I get the crickets out? And I just leave them because couldn't get them out. You know, or I remember one time I was recording on an old Stevens tape machine, which was a great tape machine, the best sounding, but it was a little flaky as far as
right.
Technically. And I was recording background vocals. I still remember on track 17. And I punched in record, and I could hear the background vocals, but the bass went away. And for some reason, whenever I recorded on 17, it erased on track 2 where I had the bass. And so and it was David Hungate was playing bass on it. So I lost like the first 8 bars without Hungate because I didn't know what had happened. I kept saying, I'm going to get Hungate in to fix this. And by the time I was ready to do it, I got used to it, and I liked it without the bass on the 8 bars. I mean, there's all kinds of things that happen. A distortion, or you're trying some kind of effect, and it goes backwards and screws up something and gives a feedback, and if you turn it back in there, it makes it be something. And I can't even recall all of them.
Well,
but I used to do a lot of crazy things, like record the song fast, playing drums to the song fast, do a drum overdub. And then when I play it back, it made the drums like half an octave lower.
Yeah, see, I love this stuff. I mean, to me, it was like that's a whole other topic. Can we do part 2 in the near future?
Absolutely.
It was such a ball. I know I just came out of left field, but unless I hear back from you, I'll send you a copy.
You can absolutely do it. But I'll tell you one thing is, when you're going through this, my old band, the Third Avenue Blues Band, we used to go to Stax, because I'm from Oklahoma. We would go to Memphis on the weekends and do demos for them. So I met Al Jackson and Booker and Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn and Isaac and Otis Redding.
And David Porter.
And all. Yeah, I didn't meet I didn't meet David Porter, but Al Jackson, Al something was the head of the label, because we were doing demos. We were going to sign with them, and then the Barkays got killed in the plane crash with Otis. And they wanted us to become the Barkays.
Well, I mean, what it's so funny because what Willie said was because the Barkays at the time where they were pretty much all just young, barely even adults at that point. So they put out a citywide audition for the new Barkays, they called it. But they wanted to but your band fell apart though. That band fell apart.
Well, no, the one I remember got killed with Otis in the plane crash.
Absolutely, no. So the original Barkays died, but what Willie said was that after that, he was playing around with sort of a singer at all these, black.
Only the trumpet player lived. The drummer with that band, Carl Cunningham, was from Oklahoma City, and he died in that plane crash. And they wanted our band to become that band, and I could smell that wasn't going to be right.
Oh, so you actually turned it down?
Yeah.
Wow. Bill Maxwell, absolutely such an honor to connect. We're going to do a Facebook Live interview when I'm out in L.A. or you're in L.A. right?
I am. I'm Studio City.
Well, I hope, dude, I had a ball, man, and I'm going to be transcribing these stories. I'll get you a copy of this later.
Great.
Really,
I appreciate it, Jack.
It's been a high honor. Bless you, brother. Thank you for everything.
Okay. Bless you. Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good day. Just another whistle stop. Things continue to coalesce in a bastion of love. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll be back with Johnny Vidakovich tomorrow.